discuss, and unfortunately, we don't Paxson anymore, so I don't have some of those extra practice questions. I'm going to find some more, practice type material and stuff for us. But today might be a little lighter than usual because I was using the stuff from Paxson. But we're kind of continuing on sort of this idea of critical thinking about, identifying different ideas in a passage. Its credibility is a lot, really kind of focused on that as far as how much you can trust a source. How much do you trust what you're reading, and asking certain questions about what you're reading. So today, that's going to be identifying bias. And we're all human, so we all have bias. It's just part of our human nature. We do our best to be objective, right? We try to weigh both sides as best we can. Of course, that kind of depends on the topic and how you feel about things. But we also want to be able to identify that. So when you read something, do you understand whether or not there's bias there? And we're going to get some tips on how to do that. That's something that comes up a lot in today's world. There's a lot of criticism that the media is very biased. That every news outlet and all this stuff, has a very skewed liberal sort of agenda or something like that. There certainly are those that have a more liberal bias than others. Across the board, that's really inaccurate. But there are some, and same way there are some that are very conservative in nature and have a very conservative agenda. So that kind of lends to what we're talking about today, and thinking about, how are you going to find that? And a lot of times it just deals with the language that you're going to see in the writing. We've been talking about sort of like loaded language and strong language. When somebody's offering opinion, that can also tip their hand that they are biased towards, a certain idea or thing. So let's go ahead. We'll take a look at the lesson now.
Welcome to the lesson on identifying bias. This lesson will teach you to identify bias so you can avoid the influence of unfair, lopsided, or prejudiced information.
Yeah, so just like I mentioned, right? So if you have a strong feeling towards something, it may be hard to be objective about it. And so, for instance, in history, as a historian, you try to have an objective view of history, and you make a case for whatever you argue, with this sort of preponderance of evidence, and that's a lot different than, say, what we talked about with card stacking, right? That would be a form of when you are trying to convince somebody to do something when it comes to propaganda. That's going to indicate bias, right? That's going to indicate, if you're cherry picking information, that's also playing into bias. Let's start the lesson here.
You and I live in the information age. That means we're constantly surrounded by mass media on our televisions, on our computers, and now on our phones. Having that much information at my fingertips is a lot of responsibility. It means I have to sort out the bad information from the good. I wouldn't want to make an important decision using biased information. I've seen where that leads. Take my former student, Adir. After he earned his HSE, Adir went to work on an assembly line. In less than 2 years, he was promoted to electronic equipment assembler. That's the person on the assembly line who mounts, connects, and secures the components of electronic devices. The job took concentration, dexterity, and exacting detail, and Adir was equal to the task. I've watched him work. He's a natural. A few years ago, Adir started hearing rumors that his company would be phasing out human assembly workers in favor of automation. He's afraid that he'd lose his job and be unable to support his family. Adir's manager, however, assured him that nobody would lose their job to robots. Any robots the company used, the manager explained, would be supplemental to the existing workforce. Relieved, Adair continued working for the company until he was laid off last year. If Adair had been more skeptical, he might have more time to prepare for the loss of his job. Maybe he would have lined up a new job in advance. But because he trusted a biased source, the loss of his job was sudden and disastrous. Identifying bias can help you see when someone doesn't have your best interest in mind.
So I mentioned this yesterday, right? That sort of the difference between being a skeptic and being a cynic. You want to be skeptical about what you read, what you see, and like I mentioned, you sort of ask questions. Is this something I can trust? Should I find more information? Things of that nature. Being cynical means that you automatically don't trust anyone, or you believe that everything has an agenda. And, it's just sort of the unhealthy side of skepticism. That lends itself to like conspiracy theories and all that kind of nonsense. But in this case, the example they use here, of course, the manager of the company, this higher up, executive or whoever he may be, it doesn't want to lose employees. He doesn't, if they're going to this automation, you don't want people to just start suddenly disappearing. So for this young guy to, suddenly lose his job, what they're kind of getting at here is like that manager is going to, his interest is about the company, right? Not so much the employee. So he shouldn't maybe just rely on, and that's another thing that we'll talk a lot about, is just relying on one source of information. This guy could maybe get more information about, other companies like his, where they have automated, where they brought in robots. Did that result in layoffs? And just, it's always good to, keep your resume updated. Just keep an eye on the job market, keep an eye on jobs that you want. And that would have maybe, prevented, any type of like lapse in employment when he did get laid off. But that's the thing. That's really important aspect, though, as far as the information. Is there more information available than just this one source? And we're going to talk a lot about sources today and in various ways here. So let's keep going.
By talking about vetting a source of information. So you've come upon a source of information. Maybe it's a newspaper article. Maybe it's a blog. Who or what is the source of this information? Does the information come from a person? If so, who does that person work for? Does the information come from a company? If so, what goods or services does that company provide? Keep these questions in mind as you investigate further.
This goes along right with, understanding who the author is. Same sort of idea.
Why does this information have your attention? Is this source an authority? An authority is a trusted source for decisions, instructions, and information. Some authorities are represented by people, such as police officers, doctors, or lawyers. Other authorities are represented by rules, laws, or books. An authority is something that you would normally trust and obey. But that doesn't mean that an authority can't be biased. If the source isn't an authority, however, the possibility of bias is much higher. Authority has a scope, an area in which the authority is relevant. Does the source speak within its authority? A police officer, for example, may have the authority to write you a parking ticket, but not if you're parked legally. And just because someone is an authority in one context does not mean they're an authority in every context. If an otherwise authoritative source talks about something outside their authority, that usually means they're speaking for themselves, and that could indicate bias. If you're considering information from a media source, who published this information, and can they be trusted? Do they have a good reputation, or are they known for bias? Can you find a way to contact the publisher? If you've never heard of the publisher before, or if there's no way to contact the source, you may want to remain skeptical. That publisher could be trying to hide bias. So you've identified the source, verified its authority, and decided that the publisher is legitimate. Is there a conflict of interest? Look for an authority that has two competing interests. A lawyer might have the authority to practice law, for example, but that doesn't mean the lawyer can represent both sides of a court case. That would be a conflict of interest. An authority with a conflict of interest is likely biased. Let's check your learning. Try to vet a source.
All right. So before we move on here, a couple things to add to that. And I mentioned this yesterday. When establishing an authority, and you'll see this in the media a lot, there's some scandal or something like that, and they'll mention somebody as this insider, right? Let's say something was going on, or there's a news story about Child Development Council in Franklin County, right, or Head Start or something like that, and they put me on the news as an insider to the CDFC, because I work for them. Well, for starters, I work at home. I don't really interact with the Head Start side of CDFC, right? I have a completely different job, but you can mask whether or not those people, that what you see on TV or read in the news are legitimate authorities. I talked about some of the stuff that criticizing like the COVID vaccines, and they would have an industry insider. Right. If they use terms like that, that's a little suspicious. And then it turns out they're like a pharmaceutical rep. They're like on the sales side of it, or the sort of the managerial side of it. They're not in a lab actually creating the vaccine. So that is not a real authority, even though they might work for the company. They might be, have some information. So that's really important. The media will mask sometimes whether or not somebody is a real authority. So check that. Sources. There's another problem here. So there's multiple types of sources of information. We're going to talk about this in various ways, probably in language arts as well. So it's not just about where the information is coming from and who is saying it, but how close to the event or the idea or the thing that is being discussed is the information. So we categorize that into three sort of areas. We have a primary source, a secondary source, and a tertiary source of information. Okay. Primary source is going to be the information, the whatever's written about it, whoever said something that is closest to the event. Big idea in history. So if I'm studying the American Revolution, right, my primary sources are going to be the documents that were written by men like George Washington or Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, our founding fathers, the soldiers that fought in the Revolutionary War. Those are the primary sources. They are closest to the event, where it happened. A secondary source, a lot of times will be things like, like a history book. It is compiled often of primary sources, but somebody has, taken that event and added information. Something like this. This book's on Maxwell Taylor. He was a general during the Cold War. That's not really important, but it's basically tells about the his time in the Cold War as a general. So that's compiled of primary sources. So the author has put that has created that by looking at the documents left by Maxwell Taylor, by those primary sources, by other information. He'll use other secondary sources to help compile that. But it's basically the next step above that. So it is nowhere close to the actual event. Sometimes the secondary source might be all that you have. Occasionally, we know that there were sources available, but they've been destroyed. They don't exist anymore. They've been lost. So that secondary source gets kind of kicked up to a primary source because then it becomes the closest thing to the event. And then finally, there's tertiary sources of information. That's really where you got to start being careful, because that's sort of like encyclopedic information. It's good if you know absolutely nothing about something you're trying to learn. So something like Wikipedia um, is just a lot of facts. The sources can be questionable sometimes. Like on Wikipedia, basically anybody can write an entry on Wikipedia. But it's a decent place to start. I would tell you not ever use Wikipedia, but you would want to go to other sources to learn more and make sure that what you are reading is credible. And it's oftentimes it's kind of shallow. It doesn't get very deep into that particular topic or idea, whatever it may be. So primary source, closest thing you can get to the event happening. That can be letters. It could be like now in the 21st century, or going back to the 20th century, video. So if somebody is documenting something, they see a crime happening or something like that, that's going to be a primary source, right? There's nothing closer to that event than actually seeing a recorded video. And an eyewitness would also be a primary source. Newspaper articles kind of go back and forth, because if it's the only thing available, it can be a primary source. But if it includes like an eyewitness, then it kind of becomes a secondary source. And of course, things like secondary sources are going to be, books, largely magazine articles, stuff like that. Where it also gets tricky is stuff like memoirs and autobiographies. So even though that person was at that event and then later writes a memoir or writes their own autobiography, you have to be careful, because they are well removed from that event happening. And it doesn't mean you don't trust it, but you also have to keep that in mind. And then particularly with things like memoirs and autobiographies, you have to be careful because of bias. Because a lot of times if somebody is writing about an event they were part of, they are giving their one side of that story. And a lot of times it means that they are maybe justifying an action, or trying to explain their side of the story, and it's only coming from that one source. So you have to be careful there. All right. Yeah, we'll keep going now.
Would Jared's staff be right to suspect him of being a biased authority?
All right, so let's take a look here at our passage. So we're looking at Jared here. Is Jared biased? Okay, so Karen Rackham recently graduated from college with a degree in computer science. She has learned how to code in C, C++, and Python. Karen's uncle Jared, who runs a small software company, hired Karen as one of his software engineers. He did this as a personal favor to Karen's mother, Jared's sister. Karen reports directly to Jared, who dictates all duties, responsibilities, and assignments for her employees. He also decides salary and promotions. Karen excels at her job, delivering quality work ahead of schedule. After her 1-year anniversary, Jared makes a company-wide announcement that Karen will be promoted to team lead. All right, so here is the text, right? Here's the letter that he sent out. So subject, Karen Rackham, new team lead, team 3. Dear teams, I am pleased to announce the promotion of Karen Rackham from junior engineer to team lead. Although Karen has only been with the company, there should be the in there. Karen has only been with the company a year. She has been instrumental in the timely completion of several high priority projects. Her new responsibilities will include fostering an open, productive team environment, setting priorities and delegating tasks, setting clear goals for the team, managing team operations, overseeing team performance, motivating team members, meeting any and all training needs. Although this promotion bypasses many senior applicants, I feel that Karen is the right person for the job. During her short time with the company, she has markedly improved our development time and made us a whole lot of money in the process. Please join me in congratulating Karen on her promotion and welcoming her as the new team lead for Team 3. I know some of you are disappointed. This is my decision. If you disagree with my decision, please keep it to yourself. Negativity can undermine office morale. I expect you to behave like professionals, no matter your opinion. All the best, Jared Clay, CEO, Above Apex Limited. Okay, so let's see, Mariama, I'm gonna go to you here. What is this biased and why?
I think it's C.
So down here, yes, Jared, Karen, or yes, Jared and Karen are related. Jared's authority has a conflict of interest by two competing interests. Yeah, that's correct. So, you know, this is one of those things it starts out, and I want to point this out here before we click on it. So, okay, all right, so they're related, right? That's his niece. That don't set up a red flag, right? She's kind of given a lot of responsibility. It definitely seems like she is qualified, right? She has a degree in what she's working in. She seems to be motivated, a good employee, and a hard worker. And the first part of the letter, it's like, okay, well, yeah, she's getting a promotion, all that. That's whatever. But that says, although this promotion bypasses many senior applicants, I feel that Karen is the right person for the job. Okay, so maybe there were other
It's like
good
he's showing
candidates.
favoritism, basically.
What was that?
I said it's like he's showing favoritism
Right, and then it's that
because
last
of his niece.
paragraph.
If there's someone else that's been there longer than her, then I feel like should have gotten the job,
Yeah,
even though she's qualified for it.
yeah, absolutely. And I mean,
that's been there longer should have gotten it too.
that is certainly a conflict of interest, right? We see this in politics sometimes, and if there's something like if there's something that happens and whoever's involved is a little too close to that event, what was it? I think it had something to do with the election, and one of Donald Trump's first attorney generals recused himself from making a decision on it. Right? When you recuse yourself, that means that you're stepping back and you're letting other people decide because you have some special interest in that, right? So conflict of interest. And yeah, it raises an eyebrow in a situation like that when there's a conflict of interest. Okay, this person is a little too close to this other person, and all of a sudden they're getting, a promotion. You might be able to overlook that to some degree, but it's this last paragraph. Then that really, we talk about like sort of loaded language. He's addressing the fact right here that there's probably going to be some pushback. This is going to cause tension. So he's aware of it, right? So he says, I know some of you are disappointed. This is my decision, right? So he's using his authority there, and then trying to sort of project that and push it back on it's sort of the employees that's going to cause the problem, not him. By saying negativity can undermine office morale, right? I expect you to behave like professionals, no matter your opinion. And that's a real problem in a lot of corporate structures. Like they don't want you to talk about raises, right? Who gets them and who doesn't. They make it sound like it's your responsibility to keep those things quiet, and you're the one causing problems if you get a raise and somebody else doesn't. But the truth of the matter is they don't want you to talk about it because somebody else may be deserving a raise, or worse yet, there's a situation of some discrimination happening, and that's a good way to cover that up, because if nobody's talking about their salaries, nobody's talking about raises, you don't know what the other person's making, right? So then you wouldn't have necessarily any evidence to show that maybe you're not getting paid fairly, next to someone else. And they throw that on the employees. It's like, be professional. Don't talk about your salary. But that's an interest of the company, not the interest of the employees. So yeah, conflicts of interest here. Certainly, Jared has two competing interests here. His company.
Great job. Jared is both Karen's boss and her uncle. These two relationships represent two competing interests. Maybe Karen deserves a promotion, but Jared's staff would be right to suspect him of being biased in favor of a family member.
Yeah, definitely causes an issue there. All right, here we go.
Once you've vetted a source of information, you have to consider its purpose. Evaluating the purpose means looking at whatever the information is doing. There are 4 major reasons that people speak or write: to describe, to entertain, to explain, or to persuade. So, what's the purpose? Knowing the purpose gives you some insight into what the source is trying to accomplish. What kind of details does the information offer? Does it offer a list of variable facts, or does it offer a lot of opinion? The details themselves won't tell you whether or not the information is biased. Facts can be misleading. Opinions can be well supported. How do the details reflect the author's purpose? If an article tries to explain something using a lot of opinion, for example, you should be suspicious of bias. What's the source's point of view? Is the source political or religious? Or is it maybe more personal? And do the details reflect the source's point of view? If the source's details support point of view more than purpose, you might suspect an ulterior motive. That means bias. Last but not least, what kind of language does the source use? Does the source use a lot of big words? What about emotional language? How does the source's language reflect their purpose and point of view? A persuasive purpose coupled with emotional language is probably going to be biased. Let's see how this. Try to evaluate her purpose.
So this, the reason we keep coming back to it is really important, right? Understanding the purpose of what you're reading. Sometimes we're going to read things, especially in the historical context, that might have a different purpose than why we're reading it. If we're just trying to take away some facts, glean something about history, but the actual purpose may have been something different. This is also really important in today's world when it comes to news, because this is a problem with the 24-hour news cycle that we have now, and whether it's CNN or Fox or MSNBC, the problem is trying to cover 24 hours of news, and they don't. They have like a fraction of actual news, and everything else on that is commentary. It's political commentary, it's editorializing, it's opinion. If you turn on CNN right now or Fox, there's probably 3 people and they're discussing and debating some topic, right? That's not news, right? Their purpose there is offering an opinion and most likely trying to sway you to, think whatever the topic is, whether it's gas prices or the war in Ukraine or something, trying to convince you and persuade you about an idea, right? Or, change your, sort of political leaning or, the support of whatever politician or something like that. So, sometimes, yeah, they just straight up give you news. But again, going to more than one source is always important. And that's the other thing here is like, what kind of language is being used? Is it loaded language, right? Is it emotional? That's going to sway you towards bias. News in particular, right? It should be very fact-based. It doesn't really offer a lot of strong language unless it's, like real tragedy, something, but even then they are objective and they try to just present the events as they happen. And then, that all correlates with, how the language, how does that language reflect their purpose and point of view? And that letter is a perfect example. Now, he didn't get into like real strong language, like, I'm the boss and, what I say goes and all this stuff, but he does allude to that, right? That is implied in the letter because he's talking about, this is my decision. I don't want this to, lead towards, unprofessional or negative morale and things like that. So it's a little subtler, it's not real strong language, but you get the idea there that he is covering up the idea that there's a conflict of interest there. All right, let's keep going here.
Would Jared's staff be right to suspect a biased purpose behind this email?
Right. So continuing on with that same letter, we can review that if you want. Let me see. Let's go to Nautica. You mentioned this earlier. So Jared's staff, are they right to suspect a biased purpose?
I feel like, yeah, they should suspect a bias thing behind it. But I think the answer is yes, Jared used it to intimidate his employees into overlooking his conflict of interest. I feel like that's the answer to that question.
Yeah, you're close. It's more that he's trying to silence the criticism. So
So that's between like before, yeah.
Yeah, it's real similar, right? Those two things are pretty close. He is trying to silence that criticism. He said something about, if there's more discussion of this, then, and he said something about, you could face, some type of punishment or termination or something like that, that would move into intimidation. But it's a little more subtle, just the fact that he's trying to keep people quiet and not talk about it, which is never going to happen in the office anyway. Let's be honest. He might not hear it, but everybody else is going to talk about it. So yes, the purpose of that email is isn't just to announce Karen's promotion, but also to silence criticism.
Great job. On the surface, the email isn't intended to announce Karen's promotion. If you look closer, you'll see that Jared is also trying to silence criticism. Jared unfairly favors employees who keep their opinions to themselves. This is bias.
Yeah, so that's, a conflict of interest is what, one form of bias there.
Now it's time to show that you've learned this concept.
All right, yeah, we know what the questions are. So I'll let you guys, it's going to be a little quicker today. But I'll give you guys about 10 minutes to do the questions. I'll go ahead and start though. Is there any questions on the idea of bias? What to look for, how that works? Just to follow up, this is social studies in the lessons identifying bias, but it should pop up. Does everybody else, that's the other thing too, are your lessons showing up for you guys?
Yep, I see all my lessons.
Good. Okay. Yeah, go ahead and take about 10 minutes. And then just a little after 1, we'll come back together and we'll finish off. We'll move to language arts a little earlier today. All right. I'll stop sharing my screen too here. All right. How's everyone doing?
I've gotten a few wrong.
Got a few wrong. That's okay. We're going to do more review. And as I mentioned, that's more of just a, idea to show you and I where you guys are. So we're going to do plenty of review, plenty of practice. This is really introducing you to those ideas. And, down the road, we're going to review them. We're going to, revisit them. So, Levon, are you still here? You asked about
I feel like it takes a little longer to read the passage.
Okay. So how far did you get?
And then to read the questions and answer them.
Okay.
I'm on question.
Okay. Well, if that's fine. We're going to take a break here in a minute. I might give you guys a little bit longer of a break today, so you guys can finish up after class. But I did want to mention here, just sort of reviewing, some of those ideas. When it comes to bias, the language being used is really important, right? understanding the purpose of the writing will come into play. And knowing anything you can about the author is also important, if there's any other details. So stacking on to those ideas that we've already started working on, right? Identifying supporting details, the main idea, everything kind of stacks on top of each other, just adding more detail and sort of adding to our repertoire of the questions that we want to ask about a source. Any questions?
I'm good. We are driving, so
Okay.
that's why I check myself.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I said I'm in the car, so there's a lot of noise.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I just, I really appreciate, you guys doing, I've seen, sometimes you guys are in your car and everything, but I really appreciate that you guys are showing up. And that's what's going to get you there. Right. So let's go ahead and how about we go to, so if you need to finish up and take a break here. See, someone's 105. We'll go to 20 after today for a break. So about 15-minute break today, and then we'll start in on language arts. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So 120. That should give you guys some time here, and always, you can save out of it and finish it up later as well. So we'll take a break now, and we'll meet back here about 120. I'll send out a text here in a minute or two. All right. All right. We'll see you in language arts.
Hi, Mr. Ma.
Yes.
I didn't get my assignment on this bias.
Really? Let me take a look while we're here.
Yeah.
Let me see. Go in here. Content. Okay. Okay, Mary, I'm gonna take a look and see if it pops up for you there.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, all right, sorry about that. I'll double check. I did assign it to the class. Had you tried to like attempt this before or anything? Like the lesson?
No, sir.
No? Oh, that's good. Okay. We're still trying to work out the kinks here a little bit, but if you have any questions later, you can let me know in language arts. We'll go ahead and take a break, and we'll see you back at about 20 after, okay?
Okay, thank
In the future,
you.
if you run into that, let me know like right off the bat, like right when the lesson starts, because those should be there immediately. So if they're not, just go ahead and say, hey, it's not showing up, and I can make sure to add it for you, okay? All right, I'll see you in a minute. I'm going to
Thank you.
speak to Levon here. Hey, Levon, I was looking at that, and it shows that the exercise or the assignment is assigned. Rachel had said something to me earlier that you were having an issue with that. Was she able to get your assignment showing up for you in the morning session? That's okay. So was Levon able to get you set up on the assignments for math and science? No. Okay. I'm going to have to talk to her. I'm going to text her in a minute because she actually mentioned you as well, that you were having problems with it. So we might have to have a little conversation. Okay. So yeah, let me talk to her, and hopefully maybe some point today we'll get it figured out after I get it to talk to her. But I already told everybody we're going to take a break till about 20 after, and then we're going to hit up language arts. So I'm going to go ahead and shut down this Zoom, and we'll meet you all back at about 1:20. Okay. You don't see the assignments tab. Yeah, that's I don't understand why. But thanks for telling me that. I want to mention that to Rachel too, and we'll see if we can get that worked out. Okay. All right, I appreciate that. All right, I'll see y'all in a little bit.